3:58 a.m., October 15th, 2025. Al-Tanf Garrison, southeastern Syria, 90 kilometers from the Iraqi border. 20 specks of heat appeared on a satellite feed 500 kilometers above the Earth's surface. No transponder codes, no response to repeated radio challenges, no deviation from their heading. 20 Shahed 136 loitering munitions, each one a flying bomb with a 40-kilogram warhead and a one-way ticket, were carving a low-altitude approach vector straight toward the most significant U.S. command node in the region. Iran's planners had spent weeks on this. The attack geometry was deliberate, a pincer formation splitting from the northeast, using a combination of ground fog and terrain masking to stay below conventional radar floors. At 185 kilometers per hour, each drone was slow by any fighter pilot's definition. But slowness was the point. They were cheap, they were expendable, and there were enough of them to statistically overwhelm any point defense system that relied on expensive interceptor missiles. At least that was the theory. Inside the Combat Information Center at Haqqa, the shift was already active. What the Iranian planners did not know, what they could not have known, was that the base was not waiting to be hit. It was already watching. Here's what makes this particular engagement worth studying. The U.S. military's approach to base defense in Syria had evolved dramatically after a series of drone and rocket attacks in the preceding years. What replaced the old reactive posture was something far more deliberate. A layered, integrated architecture where no single system carries the full burden and every layer feeds data to the next. Think of it less like a wall and more like a series of overlapping nets, each one finer than the last. The Shahed 136s were about to fly through all of them. The outermost layer was already active before the drones crossed the Syrian border. A KH-11 reconnaissance satellite in low Earth orbit had been tracking faint thermal signatures consistent with piston engine exhaust. The Shahed 136 uses a modified MD 550 motor, a small air-cooled engine that produces a thermal profile distinct enough to distinguish from ground vehicles, particularly when observed from directly overhead. That signature had been flagged, analyzed, and cross-referenced against known Shahed parameters in less time than it takes to read this sentence. Simultaneously, Signal's intelligence assets intercepted the characteristic RF emissions associated with the drone swarm's GPS receivers. By the time the swarm was 40 kilometers out, the Combat Operations Center had a complete tactical picture: bearing, speed, altitude, formation geometry, probable intent. 20 contacts, all hostile. In a hardened facility outside Tehran, Iranian technicians monitored their telemetry feeds. Their screens showed 20 green lines advancing on schedule. The plan was executing perfectly. That assessment had roughly 4 minutes left to live. The C2 system elevated the threat status automatically. Every defense unit inside the integrated network received the same target picture simultaneously via Link 16, the encrypted tactical data network that allows disparate US and allied systems to share fire control quality information in real time. No phone calls, no manual relay. The same 20 icons appeared on every screen in every defense node around the Haqqa perimeter before a single human command had been issued. The first response came without a single round being fired. Electronic warfare is the least visible form of military force and frequently the most decisive. High-power jamming systems positioned around the base transmitted a coordinated electromagnetic barrage across a frequency range spanning 1 to 18 gigahertz. That band covers both the commercial GPS frequencies the drones use for positioning and the data link frequencies used to send telemetry back to Iranian handlers. The jamming didn't just cut the signal, it flooded those frequencies with noise powerful enough to make the drone's onboard receivers functionally blind. In Tehran, the green lines on the telemetry display flickered. Then they stopped moving entirely. Error codes cascaded across the screen. Within seconds, 8 of the 20 drones lost all positional reference. Stripped of GPS, they had no reliable way to determine where they were in three-dimensional space. Some began flying erratic circles, trapped in a navigation loop with no exit. Several activated their automatic signal loss protocol and self-destructed in mid-air. Others simply flew until they hit the ground. 8 threats eliminated without an interceptor leaving its rail, without a trigger being pulled, without $1 of missile cost expended. The Iranians watched their carefully constructed attack plan lose 40% of its strength to an enemy they couldn't see. Here's what they didn't know. The U.S. electronic warfare operators had anticipated the fallback. The 12 surviving drones immediately transitioned to inertial navigation system mode. a backup positioning method that uses accelerometers and gyroscopes to estimate position based on known starting coordinates and elapsed movement. INS doesn't require an external signal. It can't be jammed, and it's accurate enough over short distances to keep a slow-flying drone on a reasonable heading toward a fixed target. 12 threats continued inbound, the second layer activated. The AN/TWQ-1 Avenger is a deceptively simple piece of equipment. An M998 HMMWV chassis with a rotating turret carrying 8 FIM-9, 2 Stinger missiles, and a .50 caliber backup gun. It was designed in the 1980s to protect Army maneuver units from helicopter attacks. Against a Shahed 136, it is not even remotely a fair fight, and that is precisely the point. Multiple Avenger units had been pre-positioned at calculated intervals around the base perimeter, their fire control systems already tracking the incoming contacts passed to them through Link 16. The FIM-92 Stinger Seeker acquires a target's infrared signature and doesn't let go. The Shahed's piston engine, still radiating heat, provided exactly the kind of signature the Stinger was built to chase. Speed, Mach 2.2. Altitude ceiling, 3,800 meters. Anti-flare countermeasures built into the later variants. Against a drone flying straight and slow below 300 meters, it is about as sporting as shooting clay pigeons with a rifle. Avenger units across the perimeter engaged in sequence. 6 drones came apart in mid-air, their airframes and payload shredding into fragments that scattered across the Syrian desert floor. The explosions lit up the pre-dawn darkness in brief orange flashes, and then darkness returned. The remaining 6 adapted. They dispersed laterally, increasing their separation distances, and dove to altitudes below 30 meters, skimming the terrain, using every fold in the ground to complicate radar line of sight. At 4:25 a.m., those 6 contacts crossed the 1.5-kilometer threshold. They were inside the inner defensive ring. They were in laser range. The 50-kilowatt high-energy laser system integrated into the Haka defense architecture does not look like a weapon from science fiction. It looks like a boxy, unglamorous piece of equipment mounted on a vehicle platform. What it does is not unglamorous. It generates a beam of coherent light and holds it on a target long enough to heat the airframe material past its structural tolerance. Against a fiberglass and carbon fiber construction like the Shahed 136, that takes a fraction of a second per target. The first drone took the beam on its left wing route. The material at that point reached temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius in milliseconds. The wings separated. The drone tumbled and impacted the ground 600 meters short of the perimeter wire. The second drone lost its avionics compartment. The third lost its propulsion. The fourth and fifth were killed in rapid succession as the system slewed between targets at the speed of an electric motor, which is to say, almost instantly. The fog that had been the Iranians' ally reduced the laser's effective energy delivery by roughly 20%, scattering the beam as it passed through water vapor. For 5 of the 6 targets, it didn't matter. The 6th drone, flying lowest and closest to a terrain feature that broke the system's line of sight, slipped through. 1 contact, less than a kilometer out, still moving. The counter-rocket artillery and mortar system, CRAM, is the land-based derivative of the naval phalanx close-in weapon system. Its core is a 6-barrel M16 820mm Vulcan cannon capable of reaching 4,500 rounds per minute, 75 rounds per second of depleted uranium or tungsten penetrators, turning the air downrange into a wall of metal. The system's Doppler radar tracks both the incoming threat and its own outgoing rounds simultaneously, making ballistic corrections in real time. It does not require a gunner to aim it. It requires only power and a target. CRAM acquired the final Shahed. The firing solution was computed in microseconds. The cannon reached full speed before most people in the building were consciously aware it had fired. The sound it makes is not a crack or a bang. It is a tearing, a mechanical roar, unlike any conventional weapon. The Shahed flew into a projectile density it had no mechanism to survive. The fuselage, wings, engine, and warhead were structurally separated from one another before any of them could reach the base perimeter. 20 drones, 0 impacts on critical infrastructure, except for one detail. A drone that had been knocked off its GPS reference early in the engagement, one of the 8 theoretically neutralized by electronic warfare, had not self-destructed and had not crashed cleanly. It had drifted for several minutes on a corrupted heading and reappeared from a vector that none of the automated systems had been tracking as a primary threat. All point defense assets had already engaged the main axis of attack. The automated systems had done exactly what they were designed to do: prioritize the most immediate mass threat, and in doing so, had left a seam. A soldier from the base's Rapid Reaction Force filled it. Armed with a drone gun tactical, a directed RF denial weapon that looks appropriately enough like a large rifle, the soldier tracked the drifting Shahed through an integrated optical sight and triggered the device. The drone gun doesn't fire projectiles. It broadcasts targeted RF interference across the drone's control and GPS frequencies within a 700-meter effective range. The Shahed's already compromised navigation failed completely. Its control surfaces locked. Its motor stopped. The drone dropped out of the sky into an empty stretch of ground, well away from fuel storage, communications infrastructure, and personnel. At 4:35 a.m., 35 minutes after first detection, the threat assessment was updated to 0 active contacts. The next phase of the operation had already been running in parallel. Every second of the engagement had generated data. Radar cross-sections, engine frequency signatures, formation behavioral patterns, INS drift rates. The subtle positional errors that accumulate in inertial navigation over time and which, when measured carefully, can indicate where a drone started its flight relative to where it thought it was. This last piece of data was particularly valuable. Combined with on-ground intelligence and satellite imagery, it allowed analysts to triangulate the drone swarm's launch point to a specific set of coordinates. A commercial warehouse structure approximately 70 kilometers east of Haka that had been used as a forward staging area. The coordinates were encoded and transmitted via Link 16 to a flight of F-16C Fighting Falcons already holding in Jordanian airspace. The F-16C Block 50/52 carries the AN/APG-68 radar and is integrated to deliver GBU-38 Joint Direct Attack munitions. 500-pound general-purpose bombs fitted with GPS/INS tail kits that correct for wind and ballistic variation during terminal descent. From release altitude, a JDAM's circular error probable is approximately 5 meters. That is not an approximation. It is a precision engineering specification. The warehouse that had launched 20 drones worth millions of dollars ceased to exist as a functional structure within minutes of those coordinates being transmitted. The engagement lasted 35 minutes from first detection to last drone. Iran had invested in platform costs, mission planning, crew time, transport, and launch operations. The U.S. fired a quantity of Stinger missiles, expended laser energy and CRAM ammunition, and released a small number of JDAMs. The cost disparity was not close. More importantly, the intelligence disparity, what the U.S. now knew about Iranian drone employment doctrine that it had not known before, was not something Iran could recover. In Tehran, the technicians who had watched 20 green lines go dark now had to write a report explaining what had happened. In Haka, the night shift continued. The base's perimeter lights were still on. The communications infrastructure was undamaged. No medevac had been requested. This is how modern integrated defense operates, not as a single system that either works or fails, but as a cascade where each layer handles what it handles best, passes the remainder to the next, and generates intelligence for the layer after that. Electronic warfare thins the attack. Interceptors engage the survivors. Directed energy handles the close threats. The last resort closes the final gap. And the entire time, every signature, every frequency, every behavioral pattern is being recorded, analyzed, and converted into targeting data for the counterstrike. Iran went looking for a vulnerability. They found a demonstration instead. The geopolitical weight of the engagement extended well beyond the Syrian desert. The U.S. position at Al-Tanf sits astride a land corridor that Iranian planners have been trying to secure for years, a contiguous route connecting Tehran to Baghdad to Damascus to the Lebanese coast, giving Iran ground-level access to Hezbollah logistics and Mediterranean influence. A successful strike on Haka would not just have damaged a U.S. facility, it would have signaled that the corridor was achievable, that the U.S. could be pressured into abandoning its position, that the cost of confrontation was too high. Every one of those signals failed to transmit that morning. Nations that study these engagements professionally, and several do, walked away with a specific calculation. The layered U.S. defense architecture is not a system you probe once and learn. It is a system that learns you back, catalogs your techniques, and prepares for the next iteration while you are still accounting for the losses from the last one. Some messages are delivered through diplomatic channels, some through press releases. This one was delivered at 4:35 in the morning over a Syrian desert, in the wreckage of 20 drones and one warehouse, in the silence of a base that never stopped functioning. If this breakdown gave you something worth thinking about, subscribe and share it. Every view helps bring more of these stories forward.